Hello, and welcome to Grade.com Talks with. Today, we're talking with Sunil Paniketh, President of American Humanist Association, an organization advocating progressive values and equality for humanists, atheists, agnostics, and free thinkers. And if you're new to our podcast, please press subscribe button either on YouTube or your podcast app, because today we're going to learn what is humanism and about an organization that is leading progressive voice in America on behalf of humanism. Hello, Sunil. Welcome to Grade.com Talks. We're excited to have you here.
Hello, Kareem. It's my pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Could you please describe American Humanist Association for someone who is not familiar with your work?
The American Humanist Association is 80 years old. This year we are celebrating our 80th anniversary. It was founded in 1941. The mission of the organization is to further humanism in the United States. And humanism can be defined a few different ways depending on who you ask, but the most common definition of it is probably our tagline, which is good without a God. What that means is that we as humanists believe in having an ethical framework to build our lives on, but one that does not depend on the supernatural. So that's the most important part of it. I mean, we have good, but we also have the without a God part of it. And obviously that translates into many different aspects of all of our lives, everything from making sure our planet is safe to furthering the ability of separating religion from government, social justice, many other things that affect our life. But at the core of it all is leading an ethical life without reliance on the supernatural.
That's quite an interesting approach. You mentioned it's good without God, and also the lifestyle around the life belief around ethical conduct. So taking being good and being ethical, taking care of the environment, being socially just, without being a part of any religious organizations or believing in a God. So thank you for clarifying that and explaining it in detail for us. Could you please describe the origins of humanism and how long it has been around, and what are we talked about a little about the core values, but the essential core values of humanism?
Yes, as I indicated, the American Humanist Association has been around for 80 years. Humanism has had slightly different interpretations over the years, over the centuries. But this modern interpretation of humanism has been around at least that long, which is the idea that you want to be able to lead an ethical life that furthers good in the world, but at the same time, you don't do that for the sake of having a belief that you're going to be rewarded in an afterlife or something like that. So that is the fundamental core of our belief system. And what that has led to is that over the decades, we have been involved in many different ideas and concepts that have led to advancement in many aspects of society. So, for example, in the US, for an early example, we were the first national membership organization to endorse reproductive rights many, many decades ago, long before it was fashionable and even widely accepted or understood. And for a recent example, in the US, it's common for legislators to form what are called caucuses to advance ideas that they commonly believe in, to lobby for, to put together legislation and so on. And just a couple of years ago, we catalyzed the formation of a congressional, the first caucus in the U.S. national legislature for advancing the concept of humanism and atheism and free thought, which are all related concepts. And on an ongoing basis, we fight for a lot of different causes. Primarily, for example, we fight for equality for humanists and other types of non-theists. We have 30,000 plus members around the country, and that's dues-paying, core members. We obviously have, hundreds of thousands of followers on social media, and we have a couple hundred chapters and affiliates, local organizations that are affiliated with us that are the grassroots aspect of our mission. So this is a membership-based organization. It's very democratic. The board is elected by the members on a basis for, every other year there's an election, and half of the board is elected by the membership. So it's a democratic grassroots organization. So it's something that looks to our members to give us direction on where we should be going, but at the same time, just like any other leadership, the board and I as president and the staff also look to push the organization and the boundaries of what we are trying to do forward as well at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Although humanism as a concept, as a belief, hasn't been around for long, and you mentioned your organization was established around 1941 as well. The humanism itself was also interlinked to the date. Yet the progressive values of humanism have been leading the change in United States. You mentioned about accepting reproductive rights and advocating for them, and you mentioned other cause that you have fought for, and you being your organization being an advocate for such values and such change towards progressiveness. What are some of the key issues today that are affecting the lives of humanists?
Yeah, so like any other organization, we face both opportunities and challenges. Mm-hmm. And probably one of the most important challenges we face as humanists, as a movement today in the US, is a change in the last few years where the traditional separation of religion and government, which is one of the core concepts of the American constitutional system, which has been in place for more than 230 years, that concept of separation of religion and government has been eroded over the last few years. And that, of course, means that our ability as non-theists, as people who don't believe in the supernatural, is in some degree under threat, to the extent that religion makes inroads into governmental organizations, and religious rights are used as an excuse to discriminate against individuals, for example. Those kinds of things are certainly things that we are fighting against at the moment. For example, the Trump administration, which just left office, had a major impact on that in terms of the threat that it poses to equality for humanists and non-theists. So that's a major item that we are fighting against. Some of the other things we are fighting for are, for example, social justice. Like any other progressive organization or progressive people who believe in progressive ideas, we are fighting on an ongoing basis for social justice in all its aspects. We are continuously looking to improve how we as humanists and the organization that we have is diversity, equity, and inclusion. The organization has evolved over the last several years to be much more inclusive, to include people of all backgrounds, all races, and many other marginalized groups are represented in the board of the organization. So now, so those are some of the things that we are doing, and of course, we are working on as an organization to further social justice in the United States. Another item that we work on is scientific integrity, which is also under threat at the moment, partly for the same reasons. So, for example, as probably you know, with the COVID-19 and the vaccine and so on. Just as one example, there's a lot of misinformation out there about the fact that it's actually a net positive to take a vaccine, whereas there's misinformation out there against that. That's just one example. So the fact that there are a lot of platforms where there's scientific misinformation is yet another aspect of our mission that we are facing in terms of being able to go against that and improve the respect for scientific knowledge, the respect for experts, and so on. So those are some of the examples.
Interesting. So you're defending civil liberties, secular governance, and scientific integrity across the United States. You mentioned, let's talk about secular governance. You mentioned that the religion over the last years has become more a part of the governance system in the United States of America. And you mentioned the Trump administration, and as a result, it might be discriminating against people who don't believe in a supernatural power. How is that discrimination is being presented and shown and among society? How, because we are, I'm not humanist, and I'm very curious how humanists are being discriminated, and is it because the government has been more religiously affected? Has it been into legislative level?
Yes, so there are several aspects to it, and the part of it that is probably the most difficult to work against is actually the judicial aspect of what has happened. So the American constitutional system has, like many others, has an executive, a legislature, and a judiciary. And the Supreme Court of the United States has life terms, which means that if you are appointed to the court, you end up spending as much as 30 or 35 years on the court. So if a president gets to appoint Supreme Court justices, that has a lasting impact. And one of the things that has happened recently is that Donald Trump was, for various reasons that are difficult to go into in a short conversation, was able to appoint 3 justices to the Supreme Court, which means now there is essentially a supermajority of justices who are very sympathetic to the viewpoint that religious rights may, in many situations, simply trump, other types of rights. So, for example, just something fairly straightforward, such as the fact that during the COVID crisis, there had to be a lot of regulations that were put in place by local governments, state governments, and so on, to go against the spread of the virus. But there were lots of instances where places of worship, for example, had a special sort of dispensation given to them, where even though they were treated the same as secular places where people get together, they got the ability to actually have somewhat looser restrictions on them. Just one simple current example. But to answer your original question, it's and of course there's legislative aspects to it as well, as you asked in your question, and that aspect has to do with things like the structure of the democratic process. So, for example, the way in which legislative districts, the boundaries of legislative districts are drawn is essentially antiquated in the U.S. So, which means that there are many situations where minority groups, which have right-wing minority parties, for example, the Republican Party in different parts of the U.S., may be able to draw districts that are advantages to them. So there are many ways in which the both legislative and judiciary, the separation of religion and government is under threat. And so what we fight for is to make sure that those issues can be fought against as best as possible. We are not looking for anything special for non-religious people or non-theist people. We just want to make sure that everybody's treated equally. Non-theists have the same rights as people who are religious or believe or otherwise have views that are different from ours. So we are not looking for anything special. We're simply looking to make sure that our rights are respected, that our ability to essentially live our lives without interference from religious aspects of power, essentially, are safeguarded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for clarifying that. The fact that you mentioned that the people who are in a position to make decisions for the whole country, for the whole population, if they are being in a favor of more religious beliefs, essentially the decisions that they might be taking in the future can impact the lives of the people who don't believe in religion and who are humanists. So thank you for clarifying that. And you mentioned that your organization and the humanists in general, you want to see the clear separation of the government and religion. You want to see a secular governance, and that's essentially a definition of democracy. So you're fighting for democracy in the United States. How do you see humanism itself and the members you mentioned that your organization expanding, but is people who believe in humanists, are they growing, and how do you see this community expanding over the next years?
Yes, and that is actually one of the great things that we have working to our advantage. Depending on which surveys you look at and how you define it and so on, every analysis of the US population shows that people who are non-religious, non-theistic, the percentage of the population is growing. And so for example, by many surveys, if you look at the people under 40, as much as 35 or 40% of individuals under 40 do not identify with any religion. So obviously young people are the future. So in that sense, the fact that the society is undergoing a transformation where the individuals associating themselves with theistic religions is on a downtrend is clearly something that helps our movement, and we are working to make sure that is something that we are able to bring forward and also use that to attract individuals who may feel like that, but who may not know about non-theism and humanism and so on, and attract them to our movement to make sure that obviously there's power in numbers. So to the extent that people may be humanists, but may not necessarily identify as such because they're just not familiar with the ideas and concepts. That's where our work in education comes in. We have an education center which offers all kinds of information, including holding webinars and things like that to make sure that people who are curious about this movement and its beliefs can get exposed to it and can become a part of it. But that's clearly our biggest opportunity. The fact that more and more young people are identifying in various ways as non-religious and non-theists.
Mm-hmm. The fact that the number of young people who identify themselves as non-atheists and humanists is expanding, and the fact, and they essentially believe in secular governance and scientific ingredity, and is a sign that society is moving into the progressive direction, being more progressive, and that's a great hope for the future of scientific development, of democracy that you mentioned, and wonderful outlook for the best for the future. If someone would like to support your organization, how can they do that?
Yeah, there are many ways to do it. Whether you want to have money, whether you have time, whether you have both. There are many ways. So, of course, if you can go to our website, AmericanHumanist.org, and make a donation if you're so inclined. We have more than 200 plus chapters and local affiliates around the U.S. You can simply, and of course, the names and all that are available on our website. So you can look for one close to to where you are, and simply join, or you don't even have to join. You can go and just participate and see if you're interested. And even if you don't have the time to do those kinds of things, or if you're not in a position to make a financial contribution, we have a major presence on social media. So, you can explore what we have to offer there. You can pass it on to people in your network, neither of which takes, time or money. So there are many ways in which you can participate.
Awesome. So the link to American Humanist Association will be provided in the description. So for you viewing and listening, if you would like to learn more about the great work that Sunil and his team are doing, you can do that by clicking the link in the description and familiarizing yourself. And if you would like to support the organization financially, you can absolutely do that. Thank you so much, Sunil. It was wonderful to get to know you and your organization.
Thank you for the opportunity.
For you listening, if you enjoyed this conversation, please press the like and share button, because this will show the YouTube and podcast algorithm that this conversation is important, that we need to protect the rights of non-atheists and humanists, and seek for the society that defends civil liberties, secular governance, and scientific integrity. Thank you so much, and see you in the next episode.